till the end of the session. Next speaker is Assistant Professor Ahmed Abdelwahed, Must University. His presentation is fat suppression sequences in MRI. Please, Dr. Ahmed.
Good morning, my dear colleagues, my professors. It's a long talk, so we will try to brief it as much as we can. What is fat suppression? Fat suppression is commonly used in magnetic resonance imaging to suppress signal from adipose tissue or to detect adipose tissue. Fat suppression can be achieved by three main methods, either fat saturation, inversion recovery sequences, or opposed phase imaging. So how to select the proper method for fat saturation? Fat suppression technique should depend on the purpose of fat suppression. Either we will do it to contrast enhancement or we will do it for tissue characterization. Again, the amount of fat is play a pivotal role in detecting the method we choose. So for fat saturation or fat sat technique, it's recommended for suppression of signal from a large amount of fat, also for contrast material enhanced images. The main drawback of this technique is its sensitivity to magnetic field inhomogeneity, misregistration artifact, and the unreliability when used with low field strength magnets. As for the inversion recovery imaging, it allows homogeneous and global fat suppression, so its benefit used with low field strength magnets, and its drawbacks, this technique is not specific for fat, so signal from other tissues with long T1 or short T1 could also be suppressed. As for opposed phase imaging, it's a very fast and readily available technique. This method is recommended for demonstration of a very small amount of fat. And the main drawback of this opposed phase imaging is its unreliability when detecting a very small tumors embedded within a large amount of fat. Let's discuss the physics. What about the basic principle behind fat saturation? The fat has different resonance frequency compared to other tissues in the body. By applying radiofrequency pulse at the resonance frequency of fat, the fat signal can be selectively suppressed, while leaving the signal from other tissues unsuppressed, completely unaffected. This will be done through three main steps. First step is the pre-saturation, when we apply a radiofrequency pulse, which will excite the fat tissue and will make its proton process faster. This is called signal phase shift. And then we do time delay, we call it fat saturation time, allowing for the fat signal to decay while other signal from other tissues will remain unaffected. And then with the image acquisition after the signal from the fat has completely decayed and the signal from the other tissues unaffected, resulting in a very deep fat suppression. Currently, we are using one of these 6 techniques for fat suppression. Either we do CHAS or the chemical shaft, we do SPARE, we do STIR, water excitation, Dixon method, or the magnetization transfer. For the chemical shaft, we selectively suppress the signal from the fat protons while preserving the signal from other tissues. This by selecting the RF pulse for the fat applied, then saturating the fat spins by flipping the magnetization, reducing the signal intensity, leaving the signal intensity of other tissues unaffected. What are the advantages? It has effective fat suppression, it's improved tissue characterization, and it's compatible with other various imaging techniques like T1 and T2 weighted sequences. Here's an image for CHAS or the chemical shaft suppression. We can see complete suppression of the subcutaneous fat and the bone marrow from the iliac bones. What are the disadvantages of chemical shaft? It's very sensitive to the magnetic field inhomogeneity. Also, this can lead to residual fat signal or inconsistent fat suppression. Variation in the fat composition, so the RF pulse may not perfectly match the resonance frequency of all the fat protons. Also, the potential for artifacts like the motion artifact. Again, for the SPARE, this done by selectively suppressing the signal from the fat protons and preserve the signal from the other protons. The SPARE technique will selectively invert magnetization of the fat protons, so the fat protons magnetization is flipped, resulting in magnetization of the other tissues such as the water protons remain unaffected and retain its signal intensity. What are the advantages? It has effective fat suppression, very robust fat suppression, improving the image contrast. It's compatible with various imaging techniques like T1 and T2 weighted sequences, and it's versatile. It can be used in any area of the body, including areas with a very high fat content. Here an image of the breast MRI with fat-SAT technique and the spare technique. Here we can see the very deep and very effective fat suppression compared to the fat-SAT. Again, we can see this image of the thigh. Here with the chest or the chemical shaft, we can see some disturbance and homogeneity and the subcutaneous fat, while with the spare imaging, it's completely clear. What are the disadvantages of spare? Also, it is sensitive to magnetic field and homogeneity, and there is a potential for incomplete fat suppression, and the drawback are the time penalty, increased scan time. As for the famous stare, it's selectively nullifying the signal from the fat protons, and stare depends on the principle of inversion recovery, where a non-selective inversion pulse with a short inversion time is applied. So in stare technique, it's also matched the T1 relaxation time of fat, which is typically around 150 to 200 milliseconds. The advantage of stare, it's uniform fat suppression and the improved tissue contrast. Here we can see the difference between spare fat suppression and stare fat suppression, the incomplete fat suppression of the subcutaneous fat compared to the stare imaging. Also again, the susceptibility artifact with the stare from the metallic artifact in the hip joint, it's eliminated in the stare image. Again, with the susceptibility artifact in the ankle, we can see in the fat-SAT it is prominent, while in the stare it is nearly non-visualized. This advantage of the stare, as usual, it's sensitive choice to the inversion time, and again sensitivity to magnetic field and homogeneity. For these techniques, we use water excitation instead of fat saturation. Water excitation is a fat saturation technique used in MRI by selectively exciting the water signal while suppressing signal from the other fat protons. We use a specific RF pulse or pulses employed to target the resonance frequency of water protons while attenuating or nullifying signal from other fat protons. What are the advantages? It has effective fat suppression, enhanced tissue characterization, and improved vessel visualization. Here we can see the very deep fat suppression of the marrow and subcutaneous fat using the water excitation only. Again, with the shoulder, we can see a very deep marrow suppression regarding the subcutaneous fat and the marrow of the bone. Its disadvantage, it's sensitive to the magnetic field homogeneity, and again, it's a variation in the fat composition. And the Dixon method, it's based on the chemical shift difference between fat and water protons. Multiple images with different echo times are acquired, and then by analyzing this phase shift, a Dixon algorithm can separate the fat and water components from the acquired data. This separation process will result in 2 generations of images. We will have a water-only image and fat-only image. The advantage of the Dixon method is it has very effective fat suppression, improved tissue characterization, and it allows us to do a quantitative fat fraction map. Here we can see difference between the chest and the Dixon, the fat-SAT and the Dixon method. Here the very narrow spatial resolution and very sharp contrast between the tissues and the subcutaneous fat with proper suppression of the subcutaneous fat. Again, between the chest and the Dixon method, here we can see the very effective suppression of the subcutaneous fat compared to the chemical shift imaging. Again, in the breast imaging, here is a fat suppression using the Dixon method, very effective with no inhomogeneity. Its disadvantage is very sensitive, the most sensitive to motion artifact, also susceptibility to magnetic field and homogeneity with a penalty of time, increased time, scan time. And finally, the magnetization transfer. It adopts that technique to suppress the fat signal by selectively saturating the magnetization of fat protons involving the off-resonance RF pulse that transfers the magnetization, not nullifying the magnetization. It just transfers the magnetization from fat to surrounding water protons, and it allows us to do a fat fraction map as the Dixon method. Thank you.
شكرا دكتور احمد عبد الواحد. انت لسه معاك دقيقه بقى، انت لسه وفرت لنا دقيقه، فممكن نسالك فيها يعني الدقيقه دي لو حد من الاودينس عاوز يسال كده. هو طبعا في عندنا ديفرنت تكنيكس الفاس يعني سبريشن او فاس ساتوريشن، انت ذكرت منهم حوالي 6 كده. عاوز اعرف يعني هنقول لك امتى نستخدم التكنيك ده، يعني امتى نستخدم مثلا الستير، امتى نستخدم سبير، امتى نستخدم مثلا ديكسون. يعني التكنيكس دي يعني لو فرضنا ان انت تكنيشن مثلا شغال دلوقتي وعاوز يستخدم واحد من دي، امتى عاوز بس رساله توصل للناس كده امتى استخدم كل تكنيك؟
هي بتعتمد برضو على الجهاز اللي معايا. لو انا معايا جهاز 0.3 تسلا مثلا، جهاز كلوزد او جهاز اوبن بتفرق. يعني مع جهاز كلوزد مش هستخدم ستير. ستير هستخدمه اكتر في الاجهزه الاوبن لان ده بيعمل لي مور هوموجينس فات ساتوريشن. لكن لو جربت اعمل فات سات على جهاز مفتوح هتلاقي الصوره وحشه جدا، هتبقى الفيلد انهوموجينيتي او السترينث بتاعت الماجنت مش هتسبورت ان انا اعرف اعمل فات سات بروبرلي. فالستير دايما بنحبه مع الاجهزه المفتوحه البوينت 3 او الحاجات اللي هو ماجنتس. مع الهاي ماجنتس بقى نبدا نفكر الليجن انا عايز ابص عليه ده وعايز اعمل كومبليت ساتوريشن لحته كبيره قوي من الجسم، زي مثلا عايز اعمل اسسمنت للفاتي ليفر، ولا عايز اعمل اسسمنت لسمول ادرينال لايبوما موجوده وسط البيرينال فات. ساعتها الاختيار بتاعي هيعتمد على انا بصور ايه بالظبط، كميه الفات قد ايه اللي انا عايز اصورها، والليجن اللي انا عايز اصوره متحوط بفات ولا لا. يعني مثلا في احنا معظم الوقت بنستخدم داكسون ميثود very effective، بتعمل فات ساتوريشن كويس، بتبص على السمول ليجن كويس، بس ده لازم يكون معايا جهاز مقفول.
تو ادفانتج ان انت بتعمل فات يا ووتر طبعا.
بالظبط، انا بعرف اعمل التو سيتس اوف داتا بتاعت الصوره الفات اونلي والووتر اونلي، بتديني ابلكيشنز كتير قوي. لكن دايما الناس بتستخدم اما الفات سات العادي اللي هو الكيميكال شيفت، يا اما الستير ده الدارج يعني.
تمام، شكرا. اي اسئله ده دكتور احمد؟ طيب شكرا دكتور احمد.